A good day, everybody. Hamtopia coming at you with Chapter 20 of The Reaper and the Scribe. It's the 10th of April. Hope everybody is at home, keeping busy, and staying safe. In 1854, Alice, disguised as a man, had set off on the journey of discovery. Although she had worked on the canals most of her life, she had never actually paid attention to its day-to-day running. She concentrated on the work that was allocated to her. She left things such as how the canal system worked and the importance of the things that happened on the canal to her father. That particular warm summer's morning opened Alice's eyes greatly. She noticed the amount of steam power, not only on the canal side, but all around, many chimneys billowing thick black smoke into the sky. Underneath every one of those tall chimneys was the fire that heated the boilers for the steam engines that powered the machines. John is right. The world is changing, thought Alice, as she heard the screech of a steam locomotive nearby. Alice ran towards the sound to investigate. Soon she found herself by the railway lines, and a little down the line she saw a steam locomotive. To Alice, it looked like a fire-breathing dragon, and it was luring her to its lair. Alice was mesmerized, and this beast was drawing her ever closer. The bright, shining rails flashed the sun's rays back into her eyes as she drew closer and closer to the beast, with steam puffing from its nostrils and fire somewhere within its belly. It would surely consume her as she took each step closer to the fiery beast. As she came close to this shining brass and steel masterstroke of technology, Alice was suddenly aware of what was behind it. It wasn't the elegant coach that people were climbing onto. It was what was behind that coach. Box after box was being stacked up on an open wagon. In fact, there were 3 flat wagons, all full of boxes of all shapes and sizes. These boxes contained garments, exquisite oils, foodstuffs, and on the back of the 3rd one, sacks of coal. Alice stopped in her tracks as she witnessed the demise of her way of life. Maybe there was a reason why she had heard that noise that had led her to that awful discovery. Maybe there was a reason her brother built these monsters. All Alice knew was that things were going to change, and if she and her family didn't change with this revolution, they would fall from existence. Alice now had a new plan. She must stop her brother from altering the boat, because that was not going to be the future that she thought it would. Alice dropped her plan to spend the next 2 weeks finding out about the new steamboats and headed back to John's place of work. Upon arriving at the factory in Olbeck, she asked the young man who was sweeping the floor of the factory where she could find her brother. The young man directed her to the work manager's office. Alice climbed the stairs and knocked on the door. "Come in." The familiar sound of her brother's voice seemed welcoming to her. Alice, or maybe I should say Alfred, was the welcome from her brother as he held out his arms affectionately. Alice ran into her brother's arms with tears in her eyes. "John, we are making an awful mistake. The future isn't boats being pulled behind lightning. I've just seen the future, and it's what you are building here, not what you're trying to do back in the dry dock. Alice, come, sit down over here next to me. I need to tell you something, and you'd best be sitting down when I tell you this. John assisted Alice to a chair and offered his handkerchief to wipe his sister's tears away. I know that our dad's way of life isn't the future, and I know what I am doing for the boat is just a stay of execution for that way of life. Yes, my darling sister, you have indeed seen the future, and yes, I am helping build the future that will kill the canals. The thing is, that won't happen overnight, and what I am doing to Dad's boat Lightning is a means to an end. I don't understand. Means to an end? You know we are being helped by some strange force, and a voice inside my head told me why I was doing what I'm doing. Not long after I finish refitting Lightning, someone is going to want to buy it from us. I don't know who this person is, but the money involved will be so great that it will buy Mam and Dad a cottage by the canal and give them enough money to live out their days in a style that they could only dream of. It will be enough for me to pay off my debts and take over this factory as my own, should I wish to do that. But most of all, it will be enough money to start you on a new venture. That steam locomotive you saw this morning, yes, the ones I build here, that is your future, Alice. Soon you will be transporting goods by rail with your own small fleet of steam locomotives and wagons. Alice just sat there, her eyes wide open, showing a glimmer of excitement. How can you be sure of this, John? It was all explained to me as I sat in my room upstairs on the day that my boss came to visit the boat. Who explained it to you? The same woman that has been helping you, I think. You mean the old woman on the canal bank? The one who gave me the ring? I think we both know she's more than that, Alice. Alice just looked at her brother in a more accepting way, and then she smiled at him. Come, Alice, have some lunch with me. Alice was hungry, so she sat down and accepted John's offer. Just at that moment, there was a tapping on the door, and James walked in. Hello, sis. What are you doing here? Asked James. I'm just here to see how my brilliant brothers are doing, and to have a bite to eat with you, said Alice, as she gave her younger brother a kiss on his cheek. As we are all here together, I think we had better have a proper discussion. As you are aware, Alice, James is here to learn about and how to work a steam engine. From the previous conversation, you now know he will not be driving one on the canal very long. Indeed, he will be on your staff as you break away from the canals and buy your way into steam power, informed John. Does James know about this? I have told him that his future isn't on the canals, as he is going to be a locomotive driver. Is that what you would really like to do, James? Asked his sister. What has that to do with anything? James is a member of this family, and this family, for some reason, has been chosen for something special. As yet, we don't really know what, but the one thing we do know is whatever we do as a family unit. It's okay, sis. I want to be an engine driver. I am learning so much. These machines are the future, and that's what this family is about. I still remember when you disappeared, the both of you, and someone else took your places. All around, everything was the same, but I knew you were both different. And from that time, I have known the destiny of this family. It's in its togetherness, said James. Well, now, just listen to you, using words like destiny and togetherness. Working here is turning you into a clever little thing, giggled Alice. I am now bigger than you, sis. You are taller and broader, but you're not bigger, James. Your sister is an amazing woman, and at all times you must look up to her and treat her with the respect she deserves, said John. Sorry, sis, said James. Alice gave her younger brother a cuddle and said, That's okay. Now, let's see what John has got to eat. All three siblings tucked into their lunch, and all three were left with a lot to think about, especially the future. It was a beautiful summer's day in modern times, and 21st century Alice's mind was more at ease, knowing she had someone she could trust to keep the builders on course. Laura Dinsdale had proved to be the most efficient secretary that had ever worked with her father, and Alice knew if she was good enough for her father, she was good enough for her. Alice knew little about Laura, but the thing she did know was that she worked very closely with her father, and he trusted her implicitly. Alice was all about teamwork, but she led from the front. She was pleased to have Laura working with her. Alice arrived in Bradford and met with an estate agent that Graham Dunn had put her on to. The estate agent took her to a run-down woolen mill just outside the city center. Again, it was an impressive Victorian building spread over 4 floors. All the windows were broken, and it was derelict, but structurally sound. It didn't take Alice long to decide she wanted it, and she asked John Beckett, the estate agent, to meet her back at his office to discuss arrangements. John Beckett asked her if she needed more time to make her decision, but Alice quickly assured him that once she had made up her mind about something, she was then in a hurry to sign on the dotted line and get things moving. They both climbed into their respective cars and made their way back to the office. At the office, John Beckett had a dossier on the building, and over a cup of tea, they both discussed what Alice wanted to do once the building was renovated. She signed a rather large check for the acquisition of the building, and then gave him a card with her business address on it. As the meeting broke up, Alice shook the estate agent's hand and said, "Send the details, measurements, any restrictions due to the building being listed for architectural importance or any other thing that might delay the work to Ms. Laura Dinsdale at Winters Logistics." "Don't you want your lawyers to look over the bill of sale?" asked John Beckett as he accepted the check. "Be assured, Mr. Beckett, should there be anything wrong with either the building or the sale, my extensive team of lawyers will swoop on you like a flock of seagulls after someone eating fish and chips at Whitby." She remembered her father using that analogy, and it had always stuck in her mind. Alice made her farewells and left the building with a smile on her face and another property in the portfolio. The 21st century Jamie Winters had begun to enjoy himself in the 16th century. He was learning something that he never thought he would be interested in. Woodwork and carpentry had never been his thing. With Jamie, it was always metalwork and engineering. In a way, of course, this was engineering, medieval engineering, and Jamie quickly had a grasp of it. The thing that Jamie was enjoying most, however, was the time he was spending with Laura Dinsdale. Laura had stirred something within him, something he had never experienced with the other girls he had known. It was as if his and Laura's souls had connected. Jamie knew that Laura probably did not feel the same, as to her he was simply the boyfriend that she had been with all along. Upon his return to the 21st century, Laura would be no wiser as to his existence. Jamie hoped that he would not lose all knowledge of Laura, and only bring back with him the experience of windmill building. Atkinson Jr. had made it clear that his rendezvous with Laura was a marker exercise, just as the placing of the ring on Victorian Alice's finger was Mother Nature's way of marking Alice for future events. Jamie hoped for more. Jamie's audience with Atkinson the previous evening was a little unsettling, but sitting on a hilltop in the arms of Laura, watching the most beautiful sunset he had ever seen, seemed to melt away the strange event completely from his mind. "We have no time for daydreaming, lad." The sound of his medieval father's voice snapped Jamie back into the now. "Sorry, Dad," said Jamie. "We have a cog to make, so we had better get on with it, son." Jamie had been struggling since he arrived with the language. He was always about to say words that didn't exist in the time period he now found himself. Whenever he did use 21st century technical language, he quickly passed it off with a large cough and then replaced it with much simpler words. He thought that existing in Victorian times was hard, but this was almost impossible. He also knew full well that very soon he would be going to another time and another set of language struggles. Jamie shrugged his shoulders, smiled, and thought to himself, "I hope this is all worthwhile." It most certainly is worthwhile. You might even say life as you know it will depend on this knowledge and on your actions that you take while you work in the past, came the voice in his head once more, reassuring him that he was still on the right path. The day moved on, and the cog that was made was as perfect as the cog that was made the previous day. Both cogs fit together just as they should. This arrangement was as simple as it could be. A shaft from the center of the sails, with one cog affixed to it on the inside of the building, altering the power from horizontal to vertical when its teeth engaged with the teeth of the cog that was at the top end of the shaft attached to the millstone. The thickness of the shafts that were made of oak was 12 inches, and Jamie pondered on how they had been made. By skilled men wielding axes. How else do you think they get made? Jamie realized he hadn't been thinking, and he had said that out loud. "I know that, Dad. I just meant I marvel at the craftsmanship." "I see. The work of a craftsman will never be replaced with anything." Jamie was glad that this man would live out his entire life, and his way of thinking would be proven right. Jamie's mind then wandered to the craftsmen just prior to the Industrial Revolution. Up until that minute, Jamie had had no time for Luddites, the people who were hell-bent on stopping the Industrial Revolution from happening. He had seen them as people who just wanted to get in the way of progress. Now he saw it from a different perspective, that of skilled men who saw their livelihoods being taken away by a machine. His medieval father was teaching him much more than how to build the gearing of a windmill. He was teaching him about how real craftsmen feel about their work, and why so much of their work still stands in his own time. Jamie's working day was coming to an end, and his thoughts turned to Laura. He wondered if she would be waiting outside. To his delight, she was. When she saw him, Laura came running into Jamie's arms. The two kissed in the low early evening sunshine. The kiss was long and loving, and Jamie enjoyed every second of it. He was now very attached to Laura, and for the first time in his life, he was experiencing the first signs of love, and it felt good. In his mind, Jamie knew that he was only in that particular time period for 7 short days. He also knew he didn't want those 7 days to end. While in her arms, his mind went back 5 years to a conversation with Freddie Chambers on Jamie's return to the 21st century. He couldn't believe that someone could fall in love so quickly, and that Freddie had been so careless as to make love to a girl from a different century to his own. Now, Jamie understood fully, as he would have done back then, if he had ever fallen in love with something that wasn't powered by steam. Jamie smiled to himself and placed his arm around his lover's shoulder, and they both walked down the hillside with the windmill silhouetted by the ever-lowering sun. Laura and Jamie once again walked to the woods, but this time it was a long stroll, hand in hand, just a couple being in love. Jamie had done nothing to hinder the progression of love between Laura and her real boyfriend, who was in limbo in the realm of nature. In fact, if anything, he had made their love stronger. Jamie was now quite jealous of that man in limbo, being the real boyfriend of the wonderful vision that was at his side. That is enough of that line of thought, Jamie Winters. You will be leaving this place soon, and have work to do a century from now, boomed the female voice in his head. So I will be going forward to build a watermill, then? I thought I'd be going further back, responded Jamie out loud. What do you mean, going further back to build a watermill? Asked a puzzled Laura. Further north, said Jamie, realizing he had said that out loud. Not far north, just to the edge of Unslet, down by the river, I think. I thought for a minute you would be leaving me behind, said Laura. The very thought distressed Jamie, as he knew he would only be a mile away from Laura. But while he would be building what would be Thwaite Gate Watermill, Laura would be long dead. I will never leave you. We will always be together. The loving couple made their way through the lush green foliage and the trees of that ancient woodland known to Jamie as Middleton Woods. In the 19th century, horse-drawn carts filled with coal were giving way to steam locomotives pulling wagons of coal. New railway lines were now delivering coal right into the center of Leeds and bypassing the coal bunker at Thwaite Watermill. In the normal running of things, this would have been devastating to Albert and Doris Winters, as they would have to bid again to get their coal from a different merchant. However, Albert Winters' boat was in the dry dock and unfit to travel on the canals, because the bow and the stern were now in 2 separate pieces. Alice had just returned from one of her fact-finding missions. She was hungry and ready for her tea. The smell of freshly baked bread wafted from the stern half of the boat. She walked across the gangplank and down into the galley. Her parents were glad to see her and to hear of her adventures that day. Alice decided not to tell Albert and Doris about what she was really educating herself on, and carried on with the pretense of looking at steamboats. Inside, she was bursting to tell them about the railways and how they were revolutionizing the movement of coal. But that talk was for John, James, and herself. Alice knew that when all that was going to happen took place, Albert and Doris would be living as they had never done before, so she decided the deceit was not too terrible. The family settled down to tea as young Frederick sat on his mother's knee and shared her jam on toast. Later that evening, John Winters was sitting in his office. The workforce had long since left as he pondered the work he was carrying out on his father's boat. He had the drawings in front of him and was scrutinizing linkages between the separate holds at the bow and the stern when he heard the tapping of small stones on his office window. "Who's there?" asked John as he opened the window. A smile came to his lips when he saw his sister and brother. "What are you two doing here?" asked John. "I want to talk to you, John," replied Alice. "I'll be right down." John let his siblings in, and they all made their way back to his office. "Tea, anyone?" said John. "Lovely," said Alice. John arrived back with the tea and a plate of fruit cake that his boss had brought him earlier that day. James stared at the cake as the plate was placed on the office desk. "Tuck in, James," said John. Both James and Alice looked at each other and then grabbed a piece of cake and bit into it. The smiles on their faces were the smiles of discovery, as neither had tasted anything like it before. This is wonderful," said Alice, trying to speak with a mouthful of cake. All three burst into laughter. "I heard good things about you today, James. It would appear you are taking to steam power with the same gusto that you did to horsepower." James looked confused. John smiled and said, "You're doing rather well at learning how to run a steam engine." "I'm really enjoying it," answered James. "I'm pleased about that." "As should you be, sis," said John. "I am very pleased with him," said Alice. "Now, to business. To what do I owe the pleasure of your company?" Both siblings looked confused this time. John laughed and said, "Why are you here?" Alice smiled and said, "John, I am learning so much about these engines of yours." "Locomotives," corrected John. "Yes, sorry, they can move much more coal than a barge can." "Indeed so. They are going to transform the movement of coal. As you know, Middleton Pit is already sending its coal directly into Leeds." "If we do change things and move to steam power on rails rather than on the canal, how will we go about it? I know nothing of this sort of thing, and until James is ready, I will have to run it," said Alice. "You will have to run it long after that, sis. James will be several years mastering the harnessing of steam, and when he is a master driver, he will not want to have to run the company. He will want to be out, keeping up with the technology, and you will need him to do that." "But I'm a woman. How will I be able to run it?" "Isn't yours the only woman's name on the owner board of a coal barge?" "Well, "Yes," replied Alice. "And has anybody ever been curious as to why that is?" "Funnily enough, no." "And has anyone batted an eyelid when they have witnessed you doing men's work?" "No." "The same will apply here. Don't ask me how I know that. I just do." "Am I really going to be driving one of those steam locomotives?" asked James. "You will be driving the fastest, most powerful locomotives in the world, young James. That is why you must carry on as you are, doing and learn as much as you can. I am going to keep you here with me. You can move in when I move Mam and Dad, Alice and baby Frederick out of the barge. That way I can carry on your education in the evenings after you have finished working downstairs." Alice grabbed hold of James's hand and squeezed it gently. "Won't that be wonderful, James? You will be able to repay John by keeping his house nice for him." James's eyes lit up when he heard what his brother had said, and he squeezed his sister's hand. "What are you doing with these drawings, John?" asked Alice. "I'm working out the couplings between the separate holds. I was looking at that very thing this afternoon on the coal wagons coming out of the pit. That chain they are using must be very strong to be able to pull a wagon of coal, but also allow the movement when the line bends slightly." "Sister, you're a genius," said John as a eureka moment hit him. "That's it! A half link on one side and an inverted split link on the other. Imagine when you come to a lock, only one boat, or possibly two, side by side, can go through at once. The bow section goes in first, and you lift the split pin so it opens. The bow floats into the lock, leaving the rest behind. Then you just pull the separate holds through with the help of the powered stern pushing. One by one, they all go through the lock, and once through, they are all fixed back together, and you are once more on your way." "You are clever, John," said Alice. "The idea came from you. I will call it the Alice Link." "That name will be lost to history," said the all too familiar voice in his mind. "I don't care," said John out loud. "You don't care about what?" said James. "Did I say that out loud? I meant that now I don't have a care, or rather, Alice has sorted out my problem." Alice just sat there with a contented smile adorning her face, feeling rather pleased with herself. James polished off the last of the cake, and the siblings said their goodbyes. All three left that meeting feeling something wonderful was about to happen. Monday had arrived in the 21st century, and Laura Dinsdale returned to the place she knew so well. She applied for an office job at the company when she left college and worked her way up as high as a personal secretary could. She was a very loyal and trustworthy employee. She was ambitious, but most of all, she was good at what she did. Laura soon learned that within this company, being female was most definitely not a disadvantage. Every available position up to the man in charge, Alfred Winters, was open to both sexes, and promotion was earned by merit. There was no other way to succeed in that company other than the ability to excel in the position you were aiming for. Even the very top job, the one held by Alfred Winters himself, would eventually go to his daughter Alice. Many thoughts of the past were going through Laura's mind as she tapped on the familiar door with the unfamiliar name on it. The shining nameplate bore the name Alice Winters Chambers, but the voice that said, "Come in," was that of Freddie Chambers. "Hello, Laura," said Freddie. "Hi. It feels good to be back," said Laura. Freddie and Laura sat down as Freddie brought her up to speed on what Alice was doing. Also, he outlined what Laura's duties would be in much greater detail. Freddie knew that Alice would be pleased to have someone on board who had already proven her loyalty and her ability with people management. "I will send you everything you need to do your work from home. Do you have a spare room?" he asked. "I'm afraid not," said Laura. "What about a garden? Do you have room in your garden for a little office?" "I have a very large garden, Mr. Chambers. Please, call me Freddie, or I feel I will have to call you Miss Dinsdale." "Freddie it is, then," said Laura with a smile. "Well, I think we're done for now, so if I can arrange to have someone home tomorrow around 2 p.m., I will have a porter cabin with all your office needs within it delivered to your house," said Freddie. "I can't thank you enough for what you are doing for me," said Laura. "Ah, thank you, my dear. I think you will find we are both helping each other." As Laura left the office, she saw a photograph on the wall. It wasn't there when she last worked there, but something about the photograph caught Laura's eye. It was a family portrait with two people Laura knew well, Alfred and Amanda Winters. Also, there was the woman whom she had now become personal assistant to, Alice Winters Chambers, and one other, obviously the elusive Jamie Winters, the chairman's son that she had never met. Strangely, he was the one who caught her eye. She stood there for a minute or two, just looking at this man's image. There was nothing striking about the man in the photograph. His clothing didn't make a girl go, "Wow," but for some reason she couldn't take her eyes away. "Hello, Laura," said a voice from behind her. Laura turned and saw a face she did recognize and said, "Hello, Sam. It's been a long time since I've seen you." "Indeed it has. I heard you got married and settled down with a family," said Samuel Jones, a driver who worked for Winters Logistics. "Long story, Sam. Yeah, I got married and had children, but the children lasted longer than the marriage, I'm afraid." "I'm sorry, Laura." "Why? I'm not. My kids are great, and now my life is back to how it was." "That's good, then," said Sam. "Did you ever marry?" "No. The one I loved got away, and I suppose I just stopped looking." "In that case, the woman must have been a fool to have chosen someone else. I must dash now, as I have things to do, but it has been lovely seeing you again," said Laura, as she kissed him on his cheek and walked away. "I could never call you a fool, Laura," thought Sam Jones, as he watched the only woman he had ever loved walk away again.